You've been praying for years, sometimes decades, and nothing changes. You've confessed every sin you can remember, you've fasted, you've worshipped, you've read every verse about faith, about belief, about asking and receiving. But the silence keeps coming back. And here's what nobody tells you: God isn't ignoring you. Something else is blocking the signal. Something invisible. And it has nothing to do with how hard you pray or how clean you think you are. There's a wound you carry. Maybe you don't call it that. Maybe you've just learned to live with it so quietly that it feels normal. Your father was distant or absent or harsh. Or the words he said built a belief inside you that you were never quite enough. And you grew up, became spiritual, became faithful, but that wound, it traveled with you right into your prayer closet. Because here's what happens: your earthly father shaped how your heart perceives your heavenly Father. If he was cold, God feels cold. If he withheld approval, God withholds answers. If he made you earn his love through performance, then no matter what you do spiritually, some part of you believes you're still not doing enough for God to respond. And the worst part, the more religious you become, the more this wound invisibly works against you. Because now you're praying harder, confessing more, doing everything right, but you're doing it from a place of belief that you're fundamentally unworthy. You're praying from behind a locked door you don't even know is there. Your prayers aren't reaching the throne because your heart still believes the lie your father taught you, that you have to earn love. That presence is conditional, that if you're not performing at a certain level, you'll be abandoned again. God hears your words, but he can't answer what your heart isn't truly asking for. You're not asking for his answer. You're asking for his approval. There's a difference, and that difference is costing you everything. The Bible is full of people who discovered this. Sarah, who laughed at God's promise because she'd spent a lifetime believing she wasn't worthy of her own desires being fulfilled. The woman at the well who'd been rejected by 5 men, and her spiritual thirst was actually a thirst to be chosen. Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times because the wound of being unworthy of trust ran so deep that even watching Jesus look at him couldn't convince him otherwise in that moment. These weren't people lacking faith. These were people carrying invisible father wounds that whispered to them in their most vulnerable moments, "You're not enough, never were, never will be." And here's what shifted for them: they didn't pray harder. They didn't confess more sin. They encountered the truth about who they were in God's eyes, not as a theological concept, but as an emotional reality their hearts could finally receive. Sarah learned that her desire mattered to God, that he wasn't withholding just to watch her suffer. The woman at the well discovered that Jesus chose her publicly despite everything that she didn't have to hide or perform. Peter encountered resurrection forgiveness, proof that his past failure didn't disqualify him. And in that shift, everything changed. Not because they became better Christians, but because the invisible door finally unlocked. Their prayers suddenly had access again. Now I need you to understand something crucial. Your father wound isn't a personal failure. It's not spiritual weakness. It's a normal human response to abnormal relational trauma. When a child's primary attachment figure, the person who's supposed to be unconditional safety, is distant, conditional, or absent, that child's brain creates a survival strategy. It learns love is not safe, vulnerability will be punished, worthiness must be earned. And that strategy keeps you alive in a broken home. But then you grow up. You meet Jesus. And that survival strategy, that wound, doesn't automatically disappear just because you became Christian. It doesn't vanish because you studied theology or served in church. It sits quietly in your nervous system, whispering the old rules to you every time you approach God in prayer. Are you good enough? Have you earned this? Will he reject you if you're not perfect? And your prayers, the most vulnerable act a human can do, they trigger that ancient wound every single time. Which means you're not actually approaching God as an adopted, beloved child. You're approaching him as a frightened kid trying to earn approval from a distant father. No wonder the signal isn't getting through. And here's what makes this so dangerous. Most Christians spend their entire lives trying to solve a prayer problem that isn't actually a prayer problem. They buy books on how to pray more effectively. They attend workshops on faith. They memorize verses about belief. They confess sins that aren't really sins, just perceived failures. All of it trying to unlock a door that was never locked by God. The lock was placed by your father. And God standing on the other side, already saying yes, but your nervous system is still protecting you from rejection that happened when you were 6 years old. So you keep praying harder. Keep confessing more. Keep trying to be good enough. And nothing breaks through. Because the problem isn't your faith. The problem is you're asking God to prove He's different from your father while your body still expects rejection. Your mind says, I trust God. Your nervous system says, fathers leave, fathers are cold, fathers withhold. And your prayers are caught in that contradiction. Some of you reading this have been praying the same prayer for 10, 15, 20 years. And the silence has become so familiar that you've stopped expecting an answer. You've made peace with it. You've spiritualized it. Maybe God's will is for me to not have this. But what if it's not God's will? What if He's been waiting for you to heal the wound so He could finally answer? What if the delay isn't His refusal, it's a mercy? Because if He answered a prayer while you still believed you didn't deserve it, you wouldn't be able to receive it. You'd sabotage it. You'd feel like a fraud. You'd wait for the punishment because wounded people expect punishment. Here's what needs to happen. You need to grieve the father you didn't have. Not to blame him, that's not the point. But to acknowledge that his wound shaped you. That the things he didn't give you, unconditional presence, unwavering belief in your worth, safe affection, those absences created a belief system inside you that isn't true. And that belief system is still running your prayer life. Then, and this is crucial, you need to let Jesus repatriate your heart. That means inviting Him into the specific moments where your father failed you. Not as a thought exercise, but as an emotional encounter. Where you feel in your body the truth that God chooses you, approves of you, delights in you, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Where His presence feels safer than your father's distance. And that shifts everything. Because now when you pray, you're not praying to earn approval. You're praying as someone who's already beloved. And that's when the door unlocks. Your prayers don't change. The words might stay the same, but who's praying them transforms. You move from, please answer me because I'm good enough, to I'm asking because I belong here. And that shift, that internal reorganization, it cracks open something. Doors start opening. Answers come. Not always the ones you expected, but real answers, genuine movement, the signal finally gets through. Because you're no longer praying from beneath a weight of shame. You're praying from the ground of already being accepted. And that's the frequency God has been waiting to hear from you on the whole time. If this landed for you, if you felt something crack open reading this, there's more work to do. The wound goes deep. Healing isn't one moment. It's a practice, a return, a relearning of what it means to be loved without earning it. And that's the journey I talk about here on this channel. Because your father wound doesn't just block your prayers. It blocks your entire capacity to feel loved, to receive grace, to build relationships where you're not constantly performing, to see yourself the way God sees you. And that's not just a prayer problem. That's a life problem, but it's also a solvable problem. Subscribe if you want to go deeper into this, into the real work of healing the invisible fractures that are costing you everything. Because you deserve to pray from a place of belonging, not from a place of earning. And your father is waiting for you to finally believe that.